own here.
James, I think it is crazy, but what I think is crazy is the response and people calling for this guy, the PM, the Chancellor, to leave right now with everything going on in the world.
Well, for me, the issue isn't the law or parties, and it's something, in fact, Michelle, worse even than the government's antisocial hypocrisy and their mendacity. The real issue here is the utter disdain for the public, which we've come to recognise in Rishi Sunak's desire to live in America once he's, moved on from this job. They have no commitment. No, you can groan, Michelle.
I will
but that's
groan.
That's a much more substantial mistake that he made than going to a party or taking a cake.
What is
He believes that he can do a nice job in number 11 now and then move on to some nice sinecure in the United States.
We have a fixed-term Parliaments Act in this country, so by definition, that job, all of the jobs in parliaments, they have a potential end date to them.
Yeah, but what he's not showing is any commitment to his constituency, the British people, or the long-term view for what needs to be done with economic policy in this country. He can fly off through his international departure lounge and show exactly that contempt for the plebs that we've come to know from Boris and the whole lockdown episode. That's the major charge that should be made against those people.
Lee Jones, am I going to get any sense from this side of the table?
Do you mean, am I going to agree with
Yes, of course I mean that, yes.
you? Define as good sense.
Yes, definitely.
This is Michelle.
Yes.
I think that the debate is being framed in an unhelpful way. So on the one hand, you've got people screaming at Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak for breaking the rules. And then you've got Tory MPs lining up to say, oh, well, it wasn't that much of a rule breaking. The issue is the rules themselves. That's the problem. That, as Keir Starmer's just said, many people made horrendous sacrifices in the name of containing coronavirus. And what the parties in number 10 revealed was that the very people that were designing and enforcing these rules didn't think that they needed to follow them, which means that they didn't really think that they were necessary for everybody to follow. So the problem is this blanket approach to social restrictions, which was not necessary because COVID was a disease that affected mostly people with severe underlying health conditions and elderly people. So people should be angry, but they should be angry that for 2 years we were placed under an authoritarian regime that controlled our movements, and that was not necessary to contain the disease. I think I sympathise to some extent with what Scarlett's saying, that you cannot just say that, oh, because now there's a war in Europe, we've got to move on from all of this. This was 2 years in which people's lives were wrecked up and down this country. There are still massive questions to be asked about the mishandling of the pandemic.
Oh, I agree with that. Agree with that, for sure.
And this is only the tip of the iceberg. We've got to ask the right questions and not engage in, debates about, oh, is he a bad guy because he broke these rules? We need to look at the bigger issues here.
Yeah, I've got to say, I did always find it quite peculiar that Keir Starmer was also pictured with a beer at that point in time with colleagues. Does anyone remember that? That's
yes,
all gone
he
quiet.
was having supper, and some drink alcohol with supper.
Oh.
Let's get into the minutiae.
Supper.
Why not?
Absolutely.
Supper and
absolutely
alcohol.
get into minutiae. I'm sure the police have investigated it and found out that you are allowed to have supper after work.
Well, I just think it's all a bit ridiculous.
The main thing in this, Michelle, is it's all a ramp for us to vote for the dismal policy-free probity of Sir Keir. Yes, he would never do this, go further than a beer, but what does he believe in? Does he have a manifesto? Or is PartyGate the only idea he has in town? That's the whole purpose of this media outcry. If you look at The Guardian just today, they've got a whole interactive timeline of how many people died on each day and how many people went to this party and that party. It's more statistics like in COVID, but even worse. That's not the issue. The issue is the contempt they have for people, and people are rightly very angry about this, and they rightly detect what Lee says, which is that the COVID policy was not worth the paper it was printed on.
Yeah,
that it was completely over the top, and that they, as Lee says, they probably didn't believe in it themselves. They weren't even thinking about themselves.